So again, today, dwelling on the misunderstood words, words commonly used in Christianity, and Swedenborg also uses a lot of these words too, and dealing with judgment. And I wonder what you think of when you hear the word judgment. Perhaps some of us might personally think of appearing in a divine courtroom with God sitting there with a gavel waiting to pronounce judgment on us. Perhaps some of us might think of the threat of hell. Perhaps in a sort of a global sense, when we talk about humanity and think about humanity, perhaps we have some anxiety around the idea of Judgment Day. And it's a fear that can leave scars for people. And it's an idea that has often been used to force people to compliance, to believe a particular set of doctrines or dogmas. And it's been used to justify many abuses through the history of the church. But what Swedenborg offers is a much more hopeful and liberating idea of what judgment is, and I think it's really important for us to understand. So I want to do a very quick tour of what Swedenborg says. So we come across ideas like this in Heavenly Secrets, which essentially tell us about God's nature. God is divine love and divine wisdom. And we learn from the teachings of the church that love cannot be angry or punish. And if you remember last month, we talked about the idea of hell, that hell is a self-chosen state. It's not something that's imposed upon anybody. No one is cast into hell. When we look at the Bible too, we're going to see some really quite striking things when we really read what the Bible says. So I particularly mentioned this from John's Gospel, John chapter 3. This is on the tail end of Jesus' discussion with Nicodemus. And I've chosen to use the Good News Bible unusually because I think the clarity with which this is expressed is really very useful. This is how the judgment works. The light has come into the world, but people love the darkness rather than the light because their deeds are evil. Those who do evil things hate the light and will not come to the light because they do not want their evil deeds to be shown up. But those who do what is true come to the light in order that the light may show that what they did was in obedience to God. So judgment isn't a future event. It's an ongoing process, and it's all about the way we respond to what is good and what is true. If we love what is good, we have nothing to hide. We're happy to allow our deeds and everything that we think and do just be there as an open book. It's when we do things that we feel ashamed of or we feel ought not to be done that we tend to hide away. And judgment is the process by which what is evil and false comes to light and is exposed for what it is seen and understood. And that's really all that judgment is. So it's a spiritual self-discernment. It's coming to see what we truly are and learning then to make a choice between one course of action and another. It's discovering what we have aligned our lives to. That is what judgment is. Again, I'm going to go back to what we read last week. In Matthew chapter 5, because there's a call here to align ourselves with God's energy and God's way of conducting business. As is described here, this is what it is to be heavenly, to be an image of God, is to act in ways God calls us to. So we're called to be like God, to be an image of God. But then I wonder what you think about the idea of judgment. Because notice the perfection of God here that's mentioned. But then also when we go on into further on in the Sermon on the Mount, there's this mention here, judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. There's a very clear command not to judge here. So how does that marry with the idea of a God who judges? If we are to be created in the image and likeness of God, if we are to act in the ways that God acts, how can we say God judges when we are commanded not to? The way I read this, Matthew chapter 7, is as a warning. We can either take on the nature and character of God, which is loving, or we can judge. And that is the choice that is being set here. Where we become judgmental, we subject ourselves to judgment. That's what I'd like you to hang on to. Now, I read from the plagues of Egypt with a very particular point. And I just wanted to share something that I've been reading during the week. I'm working my way through Swedenborg's long book on the book of Revelation, Apocalypse Explained. And I just recently read a section on hail as it's mentioned in the book of Revelation. I think it's chapter 8. So just here's a couple of passages because it then refers to the section in Exodus as well. So it's speaking here, to sound the trumpet signifies the influx of divine truth out of heaven. When this flowing down is strong, it produces one effect with the good and another with the evil. And it continues, with the good, it illustrates the understanding, joins them more closely with heaven, and thence gladdens and vivifies their minds. But with the evil, it disturbs the understanding, separates them from heaven, joins them more closely with hell, induces terror in their minds, and finally brings spiritual death. And then in the next paragraph, he mentions the hail and the fire, and we heard this in the reading this morning. And there was hail and fire mingled with blood, signifies the destroying infernal falsity and evil mingled with the truths and goods of the word, to which violence was offered. And again, he continues, when divine truth flows into the sphere where falsities and evils are, it is changed into something similar to what is in that sphere. For all influx is changed in the recipient subject according to its quality. If you remember last week, we were talking about rain and the great blessing that rain is. And the rain represents the Lord's inflowing truth into our lives. But what he describes here is the way that that blessing of rain is changed into a curse according to our state, if we are in states of evil and falsity. And I thought it was just a really interesting contrast that happens here. It's the same influx, it's the same energy that flows in, but as it reaches those states of evil and falsity, it becomes something terrifying. So look, in judgment we have this sense of a refining, a sifting through, and there's many parables of judgment in the Gospels that Jesus shares. Separation, setting good and truth separate from evil and falsity, and that's a protection. And it's the process by which our true character is revealed. One last passage for you. Judgment is predicated when evil is brought to its height, when it is carried beyond its limits, It runs into the penalty of evil. It is this penalty that is called judgment. Its nature unfolding when evil becomes so dominant that it brings about its own consequences. So again, like the idea of hell, judgment is a self-imposed state. It's nothing that God imposes upon us. It's something that we find ourselves tangled up in when we act in certain ways. So I want to think about a couple of things when we talk about judgment. I want to think of it as a loving and continuous process of self-alignment. God does not impose anything on us, but he allows us to experience the consequences of our actions because we need to see the better way of acting. It's not a distant event. It's not something that we have to fear in the future. It's something that is ongoing and it happens now. It's part of our daily existence. It's something that we actually don't need to fear. If we are living our lives to the best of our ability, that's really all that we need to know. That's really all that God can ask of us. And he will reveal ways to us in which we need to change and move on. But it's nothing to fear. And when we talk about judgment in human terms, because I haven't really mentioned that, when we talk about judging ideas or, judging other people, of course we're not to judge, because as that passage in Matthew 7 says, judge not that you be not judged. We're not to judge others, but we are able to make decisions in order to protect what is good and what is innocent. Protect those who are unable to protect themselves from what could be harmful. So those kinds of judgments we are asked to make and called to make. So moving on into the week ahead, there's a couple of things I want to suggest. Spend some time in self-reflection. Just mindfully considering your own actions and the way you move around the world, the way you interact with other people. Is it a loving way? Or is it self-centered? We all have self-centered times. We all have times we don't do what is right. Notice it and change. Make a change. Don't condemn yourself for it. Just make a change. Release the need to judge others. Release the need to see fault out in the world, because there's enough fault in here to deal with. I don't need to be worrying about what anybody else is doing. And choose love and usefulness. As I said earlier, being created in the image and likeness of God is to live a life which is loving and useful in all that we do. Notice the opportunities that present themselves during the week to do just that.